Note to self, while folks are still finding a seat, never, ever stand next to the bass drum with hearing aids in and on. Bad deal, bad deal. You're probably wondering how we got the University of Iowa Hawkeye Marching Band to come to Muscatine tonight. Just kidding for you Cyclones fans. We're so happy that you're here, and let's give a round of applause to band director Jeff Hyde for the kids' performance. Very good. Joni, you doing okay? Good. Gary, you doing okay? Great. Charlie Harper, you're in the crowd tonight. Raise your hand, Charlie. There he is. You doing okay? Good, good. Well, folks, for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is DeWayne Hopkins. I'm the mayor of the city of Muscatine, and I'm delighted that this room is almost full to capacity tonight. But to share with you, I am happy, but I'm also sad. Why am I sad, you ask? I'm an old radio guy, and they gave me a script and said, you have to keep it under 30 seconds. Well, that ain't right. I'm just here to tell you. So, in any case, we'll get going here with tonight's festivities, and we have some extremely neat people that are going to present to you this evening. And as we kick off the Blue Zones Project here in Muscatine, and as you're all aware, this is a significant event, in my opinion, and I was asked this by a member of the media earlier, why is this so significant to Muscatine? Well, look around the room. Does this not bring not only the city, but the county together? So give yourself a round of applause. This is absolutely awesome. Absolutely. For Muscatine, this means a very, very, very bright future, and therein lies why I'm so happy tonight. And I'm also happy that you're all here. Today, we are very fortunate to have some amazing guests in our community, and one of those is a sponsor of the Blue Zones Project across the state of Iowa. And that sponsor is well-marked Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I think we should give those folks a heaping round of applause. So the clock on the wall says, Mayor Hopkins, you're about the end of your 30 seconds, so it's time to move on. I'd like to introduce to you at this time, she is the Executive Vice President of well-marked Blue Cross Blue Shield. Please give it up for Laura Jackson.
So I'm gonna pull a fast one on DeWayne because you can't take 30 seconds from an old radio guy. So I'm gonna make him stand here with me while I address everybody. Does that sound good? Right? Keep him on stage, right? Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share with you a few things in less than 5 minutes. And so the first thing that I want to do, and DeWayne, you're a big part of what inspired me to say a couple of things I'm about to say. So the first thing that I want to do is to congratulate you, Muscatine, because you are absolutely leading the way to show the rest of the state how to live a longer, healthier, happier life. And that takes a lot of courage, a lot of dedication, and a community that really knows how to pull together. So thank you and congratulations, because the rest of the state is going to be watching you. They already are. The second thing that I want to share with you is I think I've already figured out what the key to your success is going to be, because you've done so many amazing things already. I visit a lot of communities in Iowa, and for different reasons. You know, sometimes it's business and sometimes it's for fun. But when I walked into the school, there's not one person that didn't say hi to me. And most of you didn't have a clue who I was. You wouldn't have a reason to say hi. But the warmness and the genuineness and just the attitude is contagious. So if I was going to move, I might have to move to Muscatine.
Yeah.
So that's economic development right there. And then, so DeWayne, the third thing that I want to share with you and the group here is that I had an opportunity to talk to Mike from your local newspaper. Amazing guy, and we had a great conversation. And a lot of times people ask, why would Wellmark do something like this? Do you ever get that?
Sure.
Yeah. Logical question, right?
By the way, as a footnote, Mike wears the coolest shirts.
Mike, I saw Mike up there. Where is he? He was up there. There he is. Hi, Mike. He does wear cool shirts. But when Mike and I are talking, he asked the question that I get often, which is, why would Wellmark do this? Well, what I want you all to know without a lot of detail is about 5 years ago, our board of directors literally said to us as a senior team, the rate of healthcare cost increases is absolutely unsustainable. we need this company to lay down a challenge and do something about it, because we need to start reining in the increased costs. And one of the things we learned very quickly is if we were going to do that, we were going to have to do it with people. And so we were very fortunate to have a board that said, go figure it out. We looked all over the world. We looked all over the country to try to find kind of the silver bullet, if you will. And there isn't one. But what we did learn about our own selves in Iowa is that we have a lot of opportunity to improve our lifestyles. So you can fix a lot of things in healthcare and the way that healthcare is delivered and the ultimate cost of it. But if we could get ourselves healthier, we would need less of it. And so that's when we were very fortunate, and this is the last thing I want to share with you, we were very fortunate with our partners at Healthways to actually be introduced to Dan Buettner, because we had been studying his work and were intrigued that he was able to travel the world and find places where people live longer, healthier lives than anybody that we know of in the state of Iowa. And so when we stumbled into this, Healthways and Dan Buettner and his group sat down and we said, you know what, we really want to learn more about what you've done. And would you ever conceive of doing this for the state of Iowa? And so Dan Buettner, if you've ever met him, said, absolutely. It's never been done before, but why not do it here? And so for you, Muscatine, you've raised your hand and you wanted to be chosen to do this. And so you are going to have the pleasure to meet a friend of mine and someone I admire greatly, because he is a visionary and he will help you see your community in ways that you could never see it before. He's an author, researcher, explorer, and quite a good storyteller, I might add. So without further ado, DeWayne, should we introduce Dan Buettner?
I think we should, yes.
Let's bring him up.
Dan, welcome again, sir. Thank you. Nothing yet.
God, I love this. I feel like I just made 600 new best friends. And I could not have asked Laura for a nicer introduction. I couldn't have paid for it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Walmart. And thank you, Muscatine, for inviting us. And we wouldn't be here if you didn't ask us to come. So we're thrilled. The fact that so many of you would venture out on such a hot night and try something new. This has not been done before. It's a bold experiment. It's been lived in different parts of the world, but it's never really been done completely in America, and I'm thrilled to be part of the experiment. I thought instead of just jumping right into it, we would start by doing something fun. And what I would actually like to do is predict how long each and every one of you are going to live. And in order to do that, I need to ask you 9 very scientific questions, and your job is to, number 1, raise your hand when the question applies to you, and number 2, and this is the hard part, remember how many times you raised your hand. So are we ready? I have very sophisticated notes here. First question, raise your hand if you sleep 7.5 hours or more at least 5 times per week. 7.5 hours. Whoa, this is a well-rested crowd. I don't have to worry about turning off the lights. Okay, raise your hand if you eat at least 3 honest servings of vegetables every single day, and French fries and ketchup do not count. 3 honest servings of vegetables. Okay, I'd say about a third of you. Raise your hand if you move at least 30 minutes a day. When I say move, it could be out jogging, it could be biking, it could be gardening, it could be walking up down and downstairs, but move at least 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. All right, we have a big jump start on that one. Now raise your hand if you have not, and I underscore not, have unprotected sex with a stranger. I like you guys already. I never answer that one honestly either. Okay. But by the way, these are real questions. These are from the National Institutes on Aging, and these are questions that are most highly correlated with longevity. So I'm not just making them up as I do most of the stuff I say. I'm just kidding. Okay, raise your hand if you belong to a faith-based community. It could be Christian, Lutheran, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, doesn't matter. Raise your hand, faith-based community, and show up at least 4 times a month. A lot of hands went down for that one. Don't worry, your preacher isn't here. Okay, this one gets at BMI, and this is a very easy way to measure if you're overweight or not. Raise your hand if your height in inches is less than 2 times the circumference of your waist or your waistline. So if you have a waistline that's 32 inches, you have to be at least 64 inches tall. So raise your hand if your height is at least 2 times greater than your waist. Okay, you know who you are. All right, another very counterintuitive. Raise your hand if you have 3 friends who, number 1, you actually like. Number 2, you can have a meaningful conversation with them. And number 3, you can call them on a crappy day and they'll actually care. At least 3 good friends. Wow. That is an extraordinary answer. I never see that many. So well-connected town. Second to last question. Raise your hand if you haven't smoked in the last 5 years. Most of you, very good. And the final question. Raise your hand if you think you are healthy enough to reach age 90 and you actually want to live that long. Age 90 or above. Interesting. About half of you. All right, so let's... Oh, I guess I wasn't supposed to pull that. All right, so did you guys count how many times you raised your hand? Okay, I need my glasses for this one. If you raised your hand 2 times or fewer, your life expectancy as a male is about 67, and as a female it's 71. If you raised your hand 4 times or less, your life expectancy as a male is 74, and as a female it's 78. If you raised your hand 6 times and your female life expectancy is 83, I'm sorry, male's 83, female 87. And if you raise your hand 8 times and you are a male, it's 88 years. And if you're a female, it's 92 years. So that's about the capacity. That's about the maximum life expectancy of the human species, 92. Did anybody raise their hand all 9 times? Anybody? Oh, would you guys please stand up? The people who raised their hand all 9 times, go ahead, stand up. Lady there, lady there. Let's give them a Blue Zone round of applause. Way to go. You guys are now all dismissed to the bar. The rest of you have to stay. Okay, so what I'm going to do over the remaining 35 minutes I have is talk about some of the lessons we learned from the world's longest lived people and how to apply those lessons community-wide, something we've been working on now for about 4 years. Something called the Danish twin study established that only about 20% of how long you live is dictated by your genes. The other 80%, 2 things, your lifestyle and the environment you live in. So you have enormous control, 80% control over how long you live. To figure out what the ideal lifestyle and environment was, I teamed up with National Geographic, and for 3 years, we searched the earth to find pockets around the globe where people are living as much as 10 years longer than the rest of us, with a fraction of the rate of heart disease and cancer. And then we put together a world-class team of experts to go to these places and distill down exactly what's going on in these places that explain this extraordinary longevity. And I'm going to tell you what their secrets are. But first, I'd like to take you to a few of the blue zones. We found our first blue zone about 120 miles off the coast of Italy on the island of Sardinia. And in this area right here, there's a cluster of 14 villages, 42,000 people, where you have more male centenarians than any place else in the world. A place where guys are still riding their bike at 102, chopping wood at 104, and beating a guy 65 years younger than him in an arm wrestle. And no, I did not let him win. So this is a culture of mostly shepherds who aren't lifting weights or doing triathlons, but they're walking, gentle, low-intensity physical activity 4 to 6 miles a day. Their diet is mostly plant-based. They have a type of whole wheat bread called carne de musica, grass-fed milk from grass-fed sheep's milk cheese called pecorino, and a type of wine called Carnenau that has the highest levels of polyphenols in the world. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like dirty boots to add bouquet and flavor to that homemade wine. But it's quite literally a artery-scrubbing antioxidant beverage, which they apply liberally. Other than that, their lifestyle was not unlike our grandparents here in Middle America. I'm from Minneapolis, same prairie. It's a little bit up 35. But hardworking people ate mostly a plant-based diet. Of course, every once in a while, they'd have a celebratory meat dinner. They tended to have pork after church on Sunday and during big festivals, and a little bit of chicken, but for the most part, not a lot of meat. But more important than what they did for physical activity and what they ate as a diet, we found what most explained the extraordinary longevity was something very unusual, something you'd never think of. It was our team's finding that it was an attitude towards aging that most explained longevity here. This was a culture that instead of in America where you sort of peak out at social equity at about age 26, here, as you're getting into your 80s, 90s, and 100s, you're celebrated for your age. You're considered a repository of wisdom. And the big thing that comes out of this is an expectation that when you're 90s and 100s, you're still working for city council. You're still doing city patrols. You're living in the house, and you're expected to help with the kids and help cook and help pass on your century of wisdom. It turns out also that children who live in homes with a grandparent actually have lower rates of disease and lower rates of mortality. So this positive attitude towards aging was not only good for the aging centenarian, it was also good for the children in that home. Something called the grandmother effect. On the other side of the planet, 800 miles south of Tokyo on the archipelago of Okinawa, we found the world's longest-lived women. About 60 times more female centenarians among Okinawan women than you see here in America. Astounding. And once again, we wanted to look in to see what explains this. This is a culture, about 1.4 million people, who have the longest disability-free life in the world. They live a long time and then tend to die very quickly. 7 good years longer than the average American. 5 times as many centenarians. 1/5 the rate of the big cancers that kill us, and only 1/6 the rate of cardiovascular disease. So how do they do it? Better genes? No. This is a melting pot of Southeast Asia. But once again, when you take a hard look at their culture, they're eating mostly a plant-based diet, mostly foods they produce. Anybody know what this vegetable is? I'll give you a quarter, if you can guess. Looks like warty cucumbers, right? It's called bitter melon. You can buy it in Asian stores up in Minneapolis at least, but it has 3 compounds that lower blood sugar and a higher level of anti-inflammatories than any other known vegetable on earth. In addition to mostly a plant-based diet, they have all kinds of tricks that help them keep from overeating. A mnemonic device, hara hachi bu, to remind them to quit eating when their stomachs are 80% full. They don't serve food family style. They tend to pre-plate their food and then bring it to the table. They also eat off of smaller plates. All practices that we know now scientifically yield consuming fewer calories at every sitting. They have committed social networks. We live in a culture that does not guarantee that we're going to have good friends around us. We have to work at it. In fact, the average American spends 4.5 hours a day watching TV. Leaves very little time after work for friends. But here in Okinawa, when people are 4 or 5, they create these committed social networks called moais. 4 or 5 people come together and they commit for life to support each other all the way through life's journey, through parenthood, through their work life, through retirement. The reason I put this picture up here, these 5 women belong to the same Moai, and they have done so for 97 years. Their average age is 102, and they get together every night, gossip, drink sake, argue about who that hot guy liked best back in 1941. He was mine. You stay away from him. I know you're thinking about him. But they truly loved each other and watched out for each other. They didn't need a private nurse. They didn't need long-term care. They had each other. Okinawans also have a concept known as ikigai. Maybe you've seen these purpose patches here. This is a culture with a vocabulary of purpose. When you ask them why they wake up in the morning, at the tip of their tongue, they'll know not only what their life meaning is, but also what their responsibility is to the community. For this 102-year-old karate master, it was passing down a martial art. For this 97-year-old fisherman, what got him out of bed, out of the easy chair every morning, he didn't need to go to the gym. He instead dove down every afternoon, speared fish, and brought it back for his children's families. And for Kamada-san, doesn't look bad for 97, does he? For Kamada-san, her ikigai was simply her great, great, great granddaughter. These two girls are separated in age by 101 and a half years. And when I asked her what it felt like to hold a descendant more than a century younger than her, she put her head back and said, "It feels like leaping into heaven." Actually made me kind of look forward to getting old. So then my editor at National Geographic, Peter Miller, greatest expeditions editor the magazine's ever had, he said, "You need to go out and find America's Blue Zone." And actually, we spent a bunch of time on the northern prairies of Iowa, where there's a very high percentage of centenarians. But it turns out it's a bit of a demographic artifact, because what happens in a lot of small towns is the young people move away and leave a artificially high percentage of the oldest old. We found America's Blue Zone 80 miles east of Los Angeles, down the San Bernardino Freeway. You get off at the Loma Linda exit, and the first thing you see on the left is a Del Taco restaurant, and on the right is a Wiener Hut. And you just have arrived in America's Blue Zone. And we're like, what? Well, if you go a little bit deeper, what you see is a community of Seventh-day Adventists, the highest percentage of Seventh-day Adventists in the world. Seventh-day Adventists are Christians who distinguish themselves from other Christians, mainly because they evangelize with health, but also they celebrate their Sabbath, not on Sunday, but on Saturday. And it turns out that the National Institutes on Health have been following Adventists for more than 30 years. 102,000 Adventists. It's a huge epidemiology study. Life expectancy for women in this country is about 80. Women sit in this audience, you guys on average can expect 80 years. But for Adventist women, their life expectancy is 89, and for the men, it's even more remarkable. Here you have a population, Americans, who live off of the freeway next to Wiener Hut. And they're living 10 years longer than the rest of us. For me, this supremely underscores the potential of optimizing lifestyle and environment. What do? Well, number one, they take their Sabbath very seriously. I'm not particularly a religious person. I'm not here to evangelize anything, but I will tell you of the 255 centenarians I interviewed, all but 5 belong to a faith-based community. These people wake up on Saturday morning, they spend some time with their God. In the afternoon, they go to these potlucks, mostly vegetarian. And then in the afternoon, hardwired right in their scriptures, they take a nature walk. The definition of which has evolved over the decades, but nevertheless, they get out. Now, is the power of any of this that once in a while they de-stress with their church, or once in a while they reinvigorate their social network, or once in a while they walk? No. The power is they do it for decades or a lifetime. When it comes to longevity, if you don't do it for a long time, it's not going to impact significantly your life expectancy. Adventists tend to eat a plant-based diet. They take their diet directly from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, you can look it up. God talks about legumes and seeds, and then one stanza later, she talks about green plants. So we have a third culture in a row, mostly a plant-based diet. Adventists also tend to hang out with other Adventists, and we now know that health behaviors are as contagious as catching a cold. So if your best friend sits around on the couch, eats Doritos, and drinks Mountain Dew, guess what you're going to do when you go over and see your best friend? That doesn't happen at Adventist circles. This is a culture that has yielded Ellsworth Wareham, a multimillionaire who nevertheless, when is quoted $7,000 to build a privacy fence around his house, at age 97, he says, well, for that kind of money, for crying out loud, I'll do it myself. And he's out on a day like today shoveling cement and hauling timbers, and then predictably, perhaps, on the third day, he ends up in the hospital. But this is not Ellsworth Wareham getting open heart surgery. This is Ellsworth Wareham doing open heart surgery. 97 years old, adherent Adventist, lifelong vegetarian. Ed Rawlings, 106 years old, working cowboy, starts his day with the swim, and on the weekends he likes to put on the boards and throw up rooster tails. And then my favorite, and I admit we kind of had a thing, Marge Deton, 105 years old. Now, Marge would get up every morning, 5:30 a.m., she'd read her Bible, she'd eat oatmeal with raisins and walnuts, that was her thing, followed by what she called a prune juice shooter. Now ponder that for just a second and then move it right on through. And then she'd go downstairs and pump iron. And after pumping iron, she'd go pedal for a half hour, 20 miles an hour. Then she'd get in her 1994 root beer colored Cadillac Seville, where she barreled down the San Bernardino Freeway, volunteering for 6 organizations. At 105, she adopted a 77-year-old to take care of. Now, you guys don't know this about me, but before my Blue Zones days, I was a kind of fanatic cyclist. I led 17 expeditions, many for National Geographic, crossed the Sahara Desert without sunscreen. But I can honestly tell you I've never been on an adventure more harrowing than riding shotgun with Marge Deton. At one point, she turns over to me and she says, you know, I feel even sexier at 105 than I did at 104. So I wrote up these 3 cultures for National Geographic. The magazine did fabulously well. I got to write a book, Blue Zones. I was able to sign many of them tonight and give them away. But just so you don't have to read it, let me jump right to the punchline. No matter where you go in the world, you see the same 9 things happening over and over and over again. The first one is they did not necessarily exercise. You never saw a 50-year-old in the Blue Zone that said, well, oh, darn it, I'm getting to the age I want to live to 100. I'm going to get on that treadmill or buy the Abmaster and get on that longevity diet. No. They lived in environments that subtly nudged them into physical activity. They lived in places where they wanted to go to the store, they wanted to go to work, they wanted to go to their friend's house. There was an option to walk. They didn't have to get in their car. Their streets were laid out for humans, not just for traffic. They also all had gardens. You saw centenarians, even at 106 and 107, continuing to grow their own food, gentle, low-intensity physical activity. They had ways to shed stress through prayer, meditation. We know that nap-taking results in lower rates of heart disease. The Sardinians just do happy hour, which is a practice I adopted. Something to reverse the inflammation of the stress of our everyday life, because no matter where you go in the world, people experience the same stress from health and from kids and from money and from finances that we do. They worry about the same things. They just have daily sacred rituals to reverse that. They have vocabulary of purpose. They know why they wake up in the morning. You know the most dangerous year in your life? Anybody want to take a crack? Most dangerous year in your life. The year you die. Yep, you won. That's it. The year you retire. You are 3 times more likely to die the year you retire than the last year of work. Why do you suppose that is? You all of a sudden take up crack cocaine? No. When you have your family as young people, you have a reason to get up and to stay active. You have your job. But then you get to that age when all of a sudden, well, that's all over. What gives you the impetus to stay engaged, to take your medicines, to do your exercise? In Blue Zones, people are imbued with this purpose lifelong. So finding that purpose, knowing what your strengths are, what you like to do, and where you can put those to work in your community. Huge secret to longevity. It's worth about 8 years of extra life expectancy, and those aren't my statistics. Dr. Robert Buettner, the former director of the National Institutes on Aging. When it comes to food, we know that moderate drinkers outlive non-drinkers about 2 glasses a day. And no, you can't save up all week long and have 14 on the weekends like my brothers Tony and Nick down here. Do as I say, not as I do. They eat mostly a plant-based diet. They do eat some meat. And it's mostly pork, which I understand is a popular message here in Iowa. But only about 5 times a month. That's the average in all Blue Zones. I'm writing a book on the topic. Beans are the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world. Lentils, black beans in Costa Rica, soy beans in Okinawa. I went to Guadalajara's tonight, and I was imbued with wonderful beans. Lupe's beans, she's here tonight. And then strategies to keep from overeating. Eating a big breakfast, serving food pre-plated rather than family style. And then the foundation on which all this rests is investing in your family, like you see in all Blue Zones. Keeping your aging parents nearby, investing in your kids, belonging to a faith-based community. We know that if you belong to a faith-based community and show up 4 times a month, it's worth between 4 and 14 extra years of life expectancy. So we're big fans of people who want faith in their life and who can find it. And then knowing who your tribe is. Who are my 5 best friends? We know that if your 3 best friends are obese, there is a 155% better chance that you'll be overweight yourself. If your best friends smoke, drink too much, do drugs, that is contagious. Even unhappiness and loneliness is contagious. Let me tell you, one of the biggest resources for longevity in this community. You know what it is? Look to your left and look to your right. It's right here in this room. You are the people who have self-selected to say, I want to change, I care about my health behaviors, and it is contagious. So I'd like to give you a round of applause. This is worth about 9 extra years of life expectancy for the average American, but how do you actually put it to work into communities? Well, right now in America, we spend about $110 billion a year on diet, supplement programs, and exercise programs. All of which are good ideas, but the problem is, if you look at the research, none of them last. You start with 100 people on a diet today, you lose about 10% in 3 months, you lose 90% in 9 months, and you lose all of them within 2 years. You all but maybe 2% in 2 years. So short-term success, a miserable failure for the long run. Same with exercise program. People start them with a lot of gas, usually right after the holidays, and within 3 years, most of them drop off of exercise programs. And even if I come back from Blue Zones with a pill that reduced aging, reversed aging, Americans wouldn't take it long enough to make a difference. So if that doesn't work, and by the way, that's what we've been trying for years and years and years in America to get health, and we're not getting healthier. So if that doesn't work, what does? Well, 4 years ago, I got another grant from National Geographic to look at cultures that were unhealthy and got healthy. And I scoured the earth. There's never been one in America that has worked for the long run. Only one place on the planet that has managed to reverse chronic disease and hold it down, a place called North Karelia, Finland. In 1972, they had the highest rate of cardiovascular disease in the world, and they reversed it, and they brought down cardiovascular disease by 80%. And they've held it for more than 20 years. So when we were designing Blue Zones, we designed it on the same model. And the difference between other models and the Blue Zone models, most exercise and diet programs focus on you. And they say, you are responsible for your health. And we're not saying that you're not responsible for your health, but we are saying that there's a better way to do it. The North Karelia project focused on something called life radius. And they reasoned that we all live about 80% of our lives about 10 miles from our homes and our works. So how do you set up people's environment, like Blue Zones in Sardinia and Okinawa, so that they're constantly nudged into the healthy habit instead of the unhealthy one? Well, it turns out there's very deep research on how to optimize people's surroundings. And the best investment comes from policy. This comes from the CDC. Today I spent all morning with 22 members of your community who represent food policy in this city. Do you live in a place where chips and soda are cheap and really available for our kids? Or do we live in a place where the vegetables that our farmers create are more accessible and priced more attractively? Do you live in a place where the economic vitality sprawls outward, or does it turn inward to this beautiful main street you have along the Mississippi? Do you live in a place where it's easy to smoke or hard to smoke? Is your built environment set up so it's easy, if you want to walk places, you can actually do it? Just optimizing, making the active option the easy option, can raise the physical activity level of a whole population by 30% and maintain it there for years. Social networks, I pointed out to your neighbors, people sitting next to you. Over the next 2 years, we're going to be working here to help cultivate new relationships, knowing that friends influences friends' health habits. And then building designs is another phenomenal opportunity. The schools, the Hy-Vee grocery store, restaurants, and workplaces. There's about 50 different tweaks you can make to the built environment of a building so that the people are nudged into better health. And then finally, we have a purpose workshop to give everybody an opportunity to find their sense of purpose and then put it to work in the community. We've actually done this a few times. Just north of here, we worked with Albert Lea, Minnesota, and helped make their environment more active. We put 3 miles of sidewalks in so that everybody could walk from their neighborhood downtown. We helped them put a trail around their downtown lake so that there was an easy place for people to recreate. We put in 3 huge community gardens so anybody who wanted to grow a garden could. Working with Brian Wansink, we worked with about 50% of the restaurants to help them tweak your experience when you come in and sit down so you don't even know it, but you're consuming 200 fewer calories every time you walk into a restaurant. Do you automatically get bread, or do you have to ask for it? When you order a sandwich, do you automatically get fries, or do you automatically get fruit, but you have to ask for the fries if you want the fries? Hy-Vee worked with us to put shelf talkers next to longevity food and even create a Blue Zone aisle where all the options as you checked out were healthy options. In schools, they adopted 9 simple policies that help kids grow up well, including the most important one. Can kids eat in classrooms and hallways during the day? If the answer to that question is no, the BMI, how fat kids are, is 11% lower than if the answer to that question is yes. And then we got about 25% of the population to sign the pledge, which you've seen out in the hallways. I'm hoping all of you will. But that just shows you simple ways that you can optimize your own surroundings so that the active options, the easy options. They let our experts come into their kitchen and set those up so people consume fewer calories. And then we put people in Moais. We have a brilliant way of putting people in self-selected Moais and challenge them for 10 weeks to either walk or do plant-based potlucks. About 60% of the people who signed up for these in Albert Lea are still doing them today. Then we gave everybody a purpose workshop, and we let the media follow us. Over the course of 1 year, Good Morning America, USA Today came out. We saw a 3.2-year bump in life expectancy. People lost weight, and healthcare costs dropped by 40%. Newsweek magazine came in and found, they brought their scientists to check our data and found our results stunning, and then U.S. News and World Reports followed a year and a half later and found that what we put in place was still working a year and a half later. From there, we were invited to Los Angeles, California, where we've been working for 2 years. We brought down the obesity rate by 14% there. And now we're back here in Iowa with the most ambitious project yet, trying to take on 10 cities here in Iowa. I call them the A students, Muscatine among them. So I don't have to tell this audience there is a health issue in our communities. 60% of us are suffering from obesity or at least we're overweight. 50% of us within the next 20 years will be suffering from diabetes. And for the first time in human history, life expectancy of our children is expected to be as much as 5 years less than our own life expectancy. Think about that. Is that because we're stupid? Do we lack discipline that our parents didn't have? Do we love our children less than our parents loved us? No. What has happened in the last 40 years is our environment has changed. We are evolutionarily hardwired to crave fat and sugar. We're evolutionarily hardwired for scarcity and hardship. But we live in an environment of abundance and ease. You cannot fill up your car with gas or walk through an airport or go get cough medicine without being confronted by salty snacks and candy bars and sugar-sweetened beverages. Discipline is a good thing, but discipline is a muscle, and muscles fatigue. Raise your hand if you walked to school as a kid. Most hands are up. Now raise your hand if your children walk to school. I see about a dozen hands. That's more than I've seen in any auditorium yet. In 1970, 50% of American children walked to school. Now we're down to 12%. We've engineered that physical activity out of their lives, which was free. There's a button to push for yard work, a button to push for housework, and a button to push for kitchen work. Our grandparents burnt about 5 times as many calories as we did doing non-exercise physical activity. Every single day, 275 images rinse over our brains, encouraging us to buy things that we don't necessarily need and to eat things that aren't all that good for us. Usually if you're ripping a wrapper off it, it's not all that good for you. The secret to longevity, the secret to health in this community does not rest with Washington, D.C. Big pharmaceutical companies aren't going to do it. Our doctors aren't going to fix it. Our doctors will help fix us when we're already sick. But when it comes to keeping from getting sick in the first place, the secret is bringing evidence-based strategies into this community that optimize our surroundings, that make the healthy choice the easy choice from the time we wake up in the morning to the time we go to bed. Then once we know what those interventions are, what those tricks and strategies are, empowering our civic leaders, Mayor Hopkins, the city council, our business leaders who've been very involved with this program, the people who own our restaurants and grocery stores, and the people who run our schools, and our mom and dads. The secret is not going to be a silver bullet. The secret is silver buckshot. It is my hope for every one of you that when you turn 105 years old, you turn to the person next to you and say, I feel even sexier now than I did when I was 104. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God. I love you guys. You cannot imagine what a gift that is. I am absolutely thundering with happiness right now. This wasn't on the itinerary, but I want to introduce to you my personal hero. I didn't tell you about this, but when I got out of college, the first thing I did was ride my bicycle from Alaska to Argentina, 15,536 miles, set a world record, which I know might sound impressive, but anybody who's seen a globe knows it's all downhill. The guy who inspired me to do that was a fellow by the name of Dan Burden. I read about him in National Geographic because he had done this very trip years before me and shot it photographically for National Geographic. Over the years, I ran into him as he became the first bicycle coordinator in America, in Florida, as he went on to become one of Time Magazine's top civic innovators of the last century. He's been to 2,500 communities throughout America, and his gift, he is like Mozart meets Albert Einstein. His gift is to help people see. And more than any man alive, he has an ability to work with civic leaders and help them see their communities not just as places for cars, but as places for humans. And we have had the great privilege and the great honor to bring him to Muscatine here now for the second time. And it's my personal honor to bring out my hero and my brother, Dan Burden. How you doing?
Thank you, brother. Fantastic. And I'm going to set this aside because I think this is working. Is that right? Do we need to adjust it? Okay, cool. Good evening, Muscatine. Good evening. I've waited a long time to have this opportunity. What an incredible outpouring of energy. And what I'd like to do in the few minutes available to me is to use a different lens than we're used to seeing with normally. And I'll warn you ahead of time, when you look through this lens, you will never see life the same. You will always see new things. And basically, I'm going to teach you how to see your own town, your own block, your own home even, as a different place, a place for people. We've gotten to the point in our country where too much of the time that we spend is not just in the automobile, but is built around the automobile. And this is a quirk in human history. From almost all of time, we knew that if we spent time walking, bicycling, walking, boating, whatever way we used to get around, it worked. But this is what our country has become, and it's not one city or dozens, it's every single city. We spend more time in the car than we'd like. We rush our own child across the street because traffic has become unfriendly. We look out on all the deep fry pits along the road and we realize there's no there. And we get older, then we realize we forgot to build the infrastructure for walking. So what I'd like to do is basically build for you a new way to look at our human habitat. And everything I'm going to share with you is basically, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, how do we now get there? And a very simple rule, every dollar we invest in our public realm, in our human habitat, in any transportation dollar, has got to add value to our land. And I know that you here have a very good idea of what is precious to you, what needs to be fixed, but in the middle of my presentation I want to focus on a few things that caught my eye. Things that Muscatine, I think, is uniquely established to do. But let me start with some other places. This is Chincoteague. It's in Virginia. It's where the ponies run wild on the island. But when you go there, this is what you see. It's like, well, why did we leave home? So we're working with that community to envision a place for people. It's a fairly simple concept. You don't spend the money on things that just build more parking lots or more width to a road. You build something that now becomes identity, place, character. The same with this community. All these are in the eastern shore of Virginia. And in every one of these cases, and I like to say that you know which streets that will need to come alive here, but in every case, you work together to do it. It costs more money to produce than just pure asphalt, but it pays massive dividends. People now linger longer. They have a place they like to invite people to their town. And think of your gateways coming into town, what it feels like today. And so all of these images are just those possibilities. Some could be in a neighborhood. They could be almost anywhere that starts to invite a different way of having a destination. This one happens to be in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Perhaps at one time it was a great street, but today it lacks identity. It lacks the kind of love or passion where you want to come down every day and meet your neighbors and so on. And indeed, it's almost so frequent, you'd almost refer to it as being ubiquitous. This is a street in Tallahassee, Florida. The goal when this road was built was get people out of downtown as fast as you can, empty it out, get them home to see Ozzie and Harriet. The engineers knew how to do that. And sadly, ever since that road was built, this wide, it takes a human life every single year. And it will be transformed, but only when people start to work together. And perhaps maybe something that is a true eye-opener. Notice the sign says walk. Do you see anyone walking? This is not where you would expect to sit in traffic 20 minutes to get through one intersection. This is Maui. And think about that. This is basically because we didn't put the school in the right location. We didn't create a good network. And now the only thing we can do is drive our children to school. Or in this case, this is Anchorage. And they put the school on one side of the street, all the homes on the other side of the street. One morning, a young girl needed to visit her teacher, and so she had to cross here, and the school bus would have come later, and she was killed. And so they now park the school bus there from very early in the morning until very late at night just to keep shuffling the children across one street. That they still refuse to rebuild to make it a good place. Now we've been chasing what the engineers thought for a long time was the silver bullet. Just get rid of people and we're going to be fine, right? It turns out that 30 years later, we've got a better idea, and from the same profession, the engineering community, no. We build villages, we build neighborhoods, we don't build traffic. Now, there aren't enough folks on board that believe that, but I've been working with your public works departments and with your engineers. They get it. And I want to celebrate that you've hired great people in Muscatine. So let's talk about going a step back to the wants, the desire of almost any young person, and then of any older person, and everyone in between, of course. The first thing an infant wants to be able to do is to be able to do what they see the bigger people do, to walk. This is my grandson, Jack, perhaps 1 week before he's finally able to walk unassisted. And I remember my own mom, who lived to be 93, still desperately holding on the ability to walk. She had Parkinson's disease, but she maintained an active lifestyle up until her last weeks of life because she was able to walk. She was able to have her own personal mobility and dignity. So one of the things I want to help you focus on tonight is look at some other Iowa towns in this case. This is a street that is built a little wide. Would you agree? And this is a street that has fewer lanes, only 4, not 7, and it moves 4 times more traffic. Why would we build roads that wide, and what is our thinking when we're really trying to build for people? I want to also share with you what inspired me to get on the road, and I like to say this, that as a result of my life's work, I was able to inspire Dan Buettner to then go on to do the things he does. If all we can do is inspire one really significant person, our life is fulfilled. But the person who inspired me was John Steinbeck. It was in a book, Travels with Charlie, the story of he and his pet poodle, Charlie, traveling across America. And at the very end of the book, John wrote something that has always stuck with me. He basically, after visiting many places in America at his last years of life, he said, America is out of sync with its values. What we say we're for, that's not what we're spending our money on. And that set me out on my quest. And so with my lens and shooting for National Geographic, when I shoot a picture like this, it's for a message. That when I see this, and I'll unfold the rest of the picture, what I'm hoping will happen tonight is every single one of you, when you look out the side windows of your car, you'll see the reality. And then you'll go and you'll work on how to make it better, and better for everyone all the time. Let me tell a little story. This is a map. Those of you who can't read it from far back, let me say that the map starts with the great-grandfather, George, in 1919 was allowed to walk 6 miles to go fishing. It was a very ordinary thing. And then the grandfather, Jack, at age 8, in 1950, was able to walk 1 mile to his own woods. Going forward, the mother, Vicky, age 8, in 1979, was allowed to walk to the swimming pool, which is 1/2 mile away. And then the son, Ed, now 8, is allowed to walk 300 yards. This is England, where this map was drawn. It's probably the same here, if not worse. I think the important thing for us to recognize is we've taken things away, and we need to give them back. And when we do, then childhood will be so much more fulfilling. And so let's start with our own children. And when we think of values, think of the values we're passing on, because we work on that built environment. And it may only be in our own neighborhood where we have the influence, but we make smart decisions and give back that wonderful opportunity to children. But keep in mind, it's gotten more complex. We're not going to overcome all the other things that now compete for a child's time, but we should be able to put back the options of doing other things. So when I had a vision sitting in a high school audience like this in study hall, I'm remembering, I dreamed up my adventure to bicycle from Alaska to Argentina, and later that became my career, and it introduced me to my good brother, Dan. Brother of a different mother, but still a brother, and a brotherhood that is enduring. We're getting to work on Albert Lee together, and now working with Wellmark, with Healthways, and with Blue Zones. And by the way, when we started this out, it was cold in Albert Lee. This is not a city you just think transitioning is going to be easy. It was minus 54 degrees that day, counting in a little bit of wind chill. But now let's talk about a few communities, and we'll make some comparisons and contrasts. Houston, Texas is one of the wealthiest cities in the world, and we think of it as the energy city. But as seen in this photo, where can you go and feel like you're in the city? I want to contrast that with Guanajuato, Mexico. Now keep in mind, Houston, Texas is now the fattest city in the world. More obesity in Houston than anywhere. Detroit tries, and some years they slightly outpace Houston. But the point is, both of these cities are built around the automobile. Guanajuato is much more like Muscatine. And in fact, they didn't have a lot of money. What they had was common sense. And so when the automobile era crept upon them, they said, well, we can't tear down our buildings. We don't have enough money just to tear them down. So they sent the automobile down through the silver mines to come up on the other side. And truly thought of something affordable and sustainable. There came a time, perhaps 30 years ago, where the pendulum that had been swinging to anti-people started to swing the other way. A couple cities caught on very early on. One of the biggest was Portland, Oregon. And the point is, we now know that living in communities, in cities, in neighborhoods is healthier for us than having fled the cities. And we're starting to recognize that. Now, I want to focus a little bit on happiness. Dan has written an entire book on the theme. I think it is very important for all of us. But Alexander von Humboldt, who was perhaps considered the father of geography and botany, traveled a lot and made this profound statement that happiness depends more on the way we meet the events of our lives than the nature of those events themselves. And we keep that in mind. I showed Thomas Jefferson along with Alexander in that Tom and he were good friends. And when they had time together, when he wasn't sailing the world and identifying plants, the two of them talked about how do you bring change. And that's what we're talking about here when it talks about the public environment. How do we bring about change? And what they concluded at the very founding of democracy in our country is change comes by informing the people. All of your elected leaders, all of your staff need what I call ground cover. That's why I'm so pleased with how many people came tonight. Once you understand the importance of the built environment, you'll work to bring it about in a way that matters. Dan also identified that San Luis Obispo is the happiest city in America. One reason I think that they're so happy, and it's one of many, is that they came together as a town to craft their future, to figure out what they wanted to be. And did, and now everything you see on this map pretty much exists. So I want to break into a couple of thoughts I have for Muscatine. As I come here as an outsider, I see several natural things that you can and should, and I think must work on, and I think you have the instincts to do this. Number one is your waterfront. You have such an incredible gift of being on the water. You orient your streets to the water. Everything has been done right. But now bring the waterfront alive. And that, I think, will spell out magic. Number two is work on your principal street through the downtown. Today isn't active enough. It needs a pulse of real energy. And as you redesign it for a people focus, it's going to come alive. And third, and this is a wonderful natural quality that you have a number of wonderful water courses, potential ways for trails to intersect and link your entire community. These are very big things. You're already launched into several of them, but don't lighten your effort on these. These are the big guys, and these are the ones that are going to pay huge dividends over time. But let me also stay on the theme of happiness. Do you see the lower line that is basically flat-lined? Right? That's happiness. The gross national product keeps climbing, but happiness is basically no higher now than it was during the Great Depression. In fact, it's slightly lower. But does everybody see there was a blip of happiness? It happened in the 60s. And we don't know why. But I'm going to show you what the 60s looked like because I was there. This is Bryant Park then. We made a few little modifications. This is Bryant Park today. And so is this. And so what we need to do is figure out what are the little things that are missing that you just have an opportunity to look at every block a little differently and figure out how to enliven everything that matters to you. Now, you also, just because we've set up our funding systems in America this way, have resources that you can put into transportation. And I'm sharing with you that you used to have old trolley lines. I saw the actual photos in your city hall today. But the transportation of the future is still going to be and must be based on human power. When we think of how we shuttle people from place to place, the assistance in place, Madison, Wisconsin, again, a very cold city, I can today turn my camera any direction and capture photos like this because they've been working on it and they've transformed. I also want to remind all of us that the original fathers of traffic engineering never intended to leave people out of the picture. The car demanded so much that in time it just grabbed it. But we really truly know that if we change our way of looking at things and thinking of things, we're going to end up in a better place. So I want to do a little pretend game here. Can everybody here in the audience pretend it's the 1400s? Is that okay? 1400s, right? Is this a correct view of our solar system, folks? Remember, it's the 1400s. Is this correct? Yeah, everything revolves around the Earth. We can look up at the sky and see that. But it was wrong. And along comes Galileo, Copernicus, and they say, mathematically, this cannot work. This can't be. So they came up with what is now the corrected vision of what our solar system should be. And this is it. And we all agree with that since, you know, other than Pluto gotten left out, I think we're fine. But let's now do something even more ludicrous. Come fast forward to today, and I'm going to show you something even crazier. What if this isn't true? What if designing and building everything, our economic system, everything around the car, is actually going to land us in failure? What would the corrected model be? It's a very simple model. It looks like this. And when we start to focus on people, the costs of building anything are going to come down. The proximity of everything we want and need and get to in a daily life, including food, is going to be more accessible to all of us. Our children will be able to go places when we get older and we decide we want to go somewhere, we can get there on our own feet, our own means. So I just want to close with this final set to say, well, what will the future look like? It's going to look more like the past. This is a great street on top in Houston where all the great mansions used to front the greatest street. And it could have a lot of traffic on it. We would want to showcase our homes. The lower image is the same category of a street. It's called a collector, and it's 5 lanes. You would never want to build a home to the street. In fact, if you did, you probably wouldn't sell it or resell it. And it's very important to acknowledge that the upper picture not only is greener and cooler and adds more value to homes, it works, and it works well. It's safe for every aspect. So we went and worked with a developer who is in Loma Linda, California. Dan talked about Loma Linda. Another reason we talk about ourselves as being brothers, we always end up going where one another are without even knowing the other went there. And so I worked with a developer. I said, your principal road, Mission, which is the one on top, has to be a low-speed street. That's your collector. People will not walk anywhere if your collector roads don't honor beauty, green, aesthetics. And then the developer was able to put the greatest homes to that street, protect the smaller interior homes, and then put in lots of parks. People want to live in open space. And as they do this, then they end up with higher value homes and so on. So I wanted to just paint this picture for you today, that the future is going to look a lot like the past. That Muscatine is going to always have its heritage to draw upon, but now with a great room and a great population. I think, am I right? Everyone in Muscatine is here tonight? Right? I mean, it feels like that to me. I just wanted to share with you, it's the small towns of America that are going to save the nation. Thank you, Muscatine.
Wow, that was quite a message that we heard tonight, and I have to tell you it was very humbling. I thought I was the only one here tonight that had ridden my bike from Alaska to Argentina, but you know that you always learn something. So, well, it was a great night tonight. Muscatine had an opportunity to hear a great message about how are we going to improve our personal well-being and the health of our community. And what we're hoping tonight is that you saw something out in the hallway and heard some things here that you can take tonight and start tomorrow to improve your well-being and your health, and also to improve the well-being and health of our community. We are very fortunate to live in a community that has the kind of leadership and commitment to its people, its future. And I've said if Muscatine can't make this happen, there's not a town in the United States that can make this happen. So it's a great journey that we're going to be on. Now, you may be asking, well, we heard, you know, what are some things that we can do to get started? Well, one of the things coming up is to improve that movement and to get more, get ourselves out. And I tell you, Muscatine is a great town to get out and walk in. And my wife and I have really enjoyed the hours and hours and miles that we've covered in this town. And I especially appreciate it now with the gnat season being behind us. But that's another story. Starting Tuesday, September 17th at 5:30 at the Muscatine Mall, we're going to, the Walking Moai is going to have its kickoff. And a Moai is a chance for people to come together, to get out there, explore their community, have great conversation, build friendships. It's a great opportunity to increase that movement and to increase our well-being. We also have a purpose workshop coming up October 12th at Muscatine Community College. And we know that people, when they can align their purpose in life with what they do, either at work or outside of the workplace, it extends your lifetime. And so we're really excited about this opportunity. We have some other things going on in the community with our Blue Zones. We encourage all of you at your workplace to ask, how can we make our worksite healthier? What can we do to be part of this Blue Zone movement? When you go out to eat, ask the restaurant you're at if they're working towards being part of the Blue Zone movement. And when you're at the grocery store, ask, see if they have the Blue Zone foods available, so that you can improve when you're eating at home or out for a restaurant. And we are working in our schools and our community to be part of this movement. One of the things I'm really excited about is the walking school bus. This is an opportunity for kids to be able to travel from home to school with an adult, but out getting some movement, and it will be good for the community to see kids out going to their homes. It'll be good for kids to see people in their yards, and this is a really great opportunity for us, and it really provides another healthy choice for our families. There are some people that have been instrumental, and this didn't just happen by accident. Everyone wearing blue shirts didn't just happen to show up at the high school tonight. The Power 9 group, the group that has really been working hard to put this project together, I think we certainly as a community owe them a round of applause of appreciation. We also have a number of people that are serving on leadership teams, that are working in committees, that are working hard to bring those opportunities to our community. And I'd also like to recognize those folks for the hard work they're doing. Thank you. We have a number of other folks that are going to be scrolled up on the screen there. We certainly thank all the people that helped with this project tonight and for the work that's being done in the future. We want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and we have a special musical presentation from the Colorado and Madison Singers.